Greetings and welcome. I trust you are well. Welcome to day 2 of this installment of new videos, One Nation Daily. My name is Maurice. Some of you will know me as Croc or DJ Croc, but we're going to keep it Maurice in this space. Day 2. Welcome back. If you're new here, this is the second video of a 30-day challenge for me to show up every day for 30 days here on YouTube talking about a different topic. If you want to get more context into why I'm doing this and how this came about and all of that stuff, then just check the video before. Just check day 1's video entitled Heads Up, and I explain all of that there. For today's video is going to be a review video. Now, some of you might be aware that I've started to do review videos. Generally, the reviews are around music shows and live performances. Those are the reviews that I've done so far, or album reviews. This review is going to be a bit different because this review is about a conference that I attended recently, earlier on this month. The conference was this one. It was called Equity in Grief. I'm not sure if you can see it there, but it's called Equity in Grief. And it took place at the Landing Canary Wharf in London on Friday, the 6th of Feb. And this conference was really about, it was really about the experience, or black people's experience, primarily experience of grief. And I went to this, or when I saw this, I was interested in getting to this for two main reasons. One, because I work a lot within the funeral industry by doing live streams of funerals, providing sound systems and music for funerals. So I do a lot of work within the industry, and so I partly wanted to go there to network with other professionals who also work within the industry and see what I could learn and make new connections and things of that nature, see what I could learn from it. I was also very curious about it. I didn't really know what to expect. So I really went there with a mindset of just going to look, listen, and learn. I was very curious. So that was really the mindset: go to look, listen, and learn, and maybe network. The second reason I went to this conference was because of my own personal experience or experiences of grief and bereavement. Some of you may know, some of you who are new to this or new to me might not be aware that I've had a long list of bereavements and some quite horrific experiences of grief and bereavement that I will probably speak about more in a later video. But I went also for personal reasons, is the point I'm trying to make. So I went for professional reasons because I work within the funeral industry, but I also went for personal reasons as well, to see what this conference could, I guess, maybe do for me, or what I could learn from it on a personal note in connection with my own experiences of grief and bereavement. So my thinking was twofold in going to this conference and wanting to check this out and really see what this was about. I've never seen anything like this before. I've never seen a conference like this before that is primarily about grief and bereavement, particularly not from the experiential perspective of black people. So I was very curious about this conference. So that's why I went. What to say? Let's start with what I felt was good. Normally this is where I start with my reviews. I normally start with what was good and then move on to what was not so good. So let's do that. Let's start with what was good. So, what was good, I felt, was first of all the fact that this conference even happened. Because, as I said already, I've never seen anything like this before. I've never yet witnessed anything like this before. I should also mention that the conference was organised primarily by Patrick Vernon, OBE, Dr. Yancey Ralston, and also Debbie Lewinson, who I'll probably mention later on as well in this video, because I know Debbie quite well and I've worked with her within the funeral industry, and I know on a personal level as well. Also connected to grieving, grief and bereavement. So they were the main organisers of the event. So what was good? It happened, basically, was the first thing. I've never seen anything like this before. And from my experience within the professional side of the funeral industry and the grief and bereavement industry, and also from a personal perspective of my own experiences and people around me, I know that more conversations need to be had, particularly within the Black community, about grief and bereavement. I can't really speak to other communities because I'm not a member of those communities. So I don't know what the cultural specifics are within other communities. I can only speak to what I know, which is my own. So I know that there are more conversations that need to be had about death and bereavement and grieving. I know that as a community, these conversations tend to be shied away from. And I know that, again, from experience and being in support spaces, as someone who's seeking support and also as someone who's been a co-facilitator in supportive spaces for people who are going through grief or bereavement, that a lot of the trauma, pain, anguish comes from these conversations not being had. So, for example, funeral arrangements is a popular area where discords happen amongst families. And a lot of that is because conversations that needed to be had or should have been had have not been had. So arguments happen about what should or shouldn't happen, what they believe the person who's passed would want or wouldn't want, because the conversations were never had. In terms of accessing support services or getting support for ourselves around death and bereavement, there's a whole issue with that, about whether or not there are enough support services that cater to our experience and cultural understanding or experience of death and bereavement, whether those services are accessible or how accessible those services are to us. And so there's that aspect as well, why more of these conversations need to be had. I hear a lot of people talking about men need to speak more about these things, men need to open up more, men need to talk more. And while I think there is an element of truth in that, I believe that generally men are doing a lot better at speaking about these things, particularly since the lockdown in 2020. I feel that one of the few positive things that has come out of that is men have come out of that period being more in touch with ourselves and our thoughts, feelings and emotions, and have got better at sharing all of that with each other. So I think that is already beginning to happen amongst men. But generally speaking, these conversations tend to be shied away from, and they need to happen more. So it was good that this conference was happening. It's good that it happened, I should say. I believe this was the first one of its kind. I hope it won't be the last. What else was good? The venue. The venue was beautiful. As I said, it was where was it? Landing, Canary Wharf. The venue was beautiful. From I got in there, it was just really, really nice. The staff were really friendly, and everything was wonderful. It was a really nice venue, really, really, really nice venue. I think they did very well getting that venue. It was a good shout getting that venue. So the venue was beautiful, staff were wonderful, it was lovely. Another thing that I felt was good was they had a number of stalls around in the main room. They were mainly bookstores, but they also had a massage stall as well, where you could go and lie down and get your shoulders and your neck and your back massaged, which was quite cool. I didn't experience that. I did want to, but I was more wanting to listen to the speakers and take in the conversations that were being had, although the massage thing looked very inviting. But it was good that they had that. So they had a number of stalls around the place, which was good, I felt as well. And because it was in the main room where everyone was, it was instantly accessible. You didn't have to go to another space or another room to find the stalls or access to stalls. It was right there in the same main room where we were, making those stalls more accessible. Although sometimes the conversations from the stalls was a bit intrusive to what was happening on the main stage, but generally it was good to have the stalls dotted around the room as well, which I thought was also very good. The food was also good. Got to talk about the food. The food was good. The main reason I say that is because they had a good number of vegan options there. Now, I'm not a vegan, I'm not even a vegetarian, but my diet is predominantly plant-based. I don't do dairy, I don't do much sugar, and I eat meat rarely. I don't really do much meat. Once in a while, I'll go and get some jerk chicken from Maureen's. Maureen's jerk chicken in Brixton is the best jerk chicken you can get anywhere. So once in a while, once in a blue moon, I might find myself at Maureen's getting some jerk. But other than that, I don't really do meat. I don't do dairy. I don't do much sugar. It's pretty much a plant-based diet that I have. So I was very happy to see the vegan options on the menu, and the food was nice. It was presented well. It was served great. It was wonderful. So the food was a plus as well. Definitely because of the vegan options, but it was nice. It was good. What else? The speakers. They had some really good speakers at this event throughout the day. Some of them, Patrick Vernon, OBE, was there and he spoke a little bit towards the end. Marcia Rigg was there as one of the panelists. Marcia has been campaigning for years, for I think over 20 years now, for justice for the death of her brother Sean Rigg, who was killed by the Metropolitan Police at Brixton Police Station. She was there speaking about her experience of fighting for justice for Sean. Always very powerful listening to Marcia speak, but it was wonderful to hear her there speaking and hear her insights into her experience. Reverend Cassius Francis was there, who was a good friend of mine. We actually studied together at university, so it was wonderful to have him there and see him there as one of the panelists giving his insight. There was a funeral director there whose name I forget. It's probably in the brochure, but the funeral director's perspective I found was very, very good. I'll probably speak a little bit more on that later. There was a youth worker there, someone who worked predominantly with young men, boys and young men, and there were some other academics there. There were people who worked in the health industry, I think the public health industry. So there were a number of panelists who all brought really insightful perspectives to the conference. I thought that was good. And the panel leaders, who was Debbie and also Dr. Yancy Ralston, they posed some really insightful questions. I think insightful is the word I'm looking for. Questions to the panelists, and got some really good responses from them as well. And there was space for the people who were there attending to ask questions to the panelists as well. So I thought that the choice of panelists was quite good. The questions posed to them and the answers that they gave was quite good, and the conversations that came out of that was quite good as well. So the speakers and the panels generally very, very good. I think they did well with that. The sound, this goes back to the venue. Sound and the technicals with the sound was also pretty good. You know, those of you who know me know that I'm the sound man in me is very particular when it comes to sound quality. That's one of the things I'm always looking out for at events, and I'm always going to score. I always give scores, or I always mention the sound quality whether it's live events or whatever kind of music review I'm doing. I always talk about sound quality, and the sound quality and the technicals at this event was good as well. I saw some of the technicians walking around with their iPads, making adjustments to the sounds and the microphones as the day went on, as they needed to, and that's what I do with my sound and my stuff as well. I've posted a video recently showing how I do that. So it was good to see that level of technical proficiency there with the sound. So sound was good and the technicals were good as well. So overall, I thought all of these areas were pluses, were positives for the conference. I should also mention, as I mentioned, the bookstores. There is this book, I should mention this book, Black Grief and Healing, which is also by Patrick Vernon and Dr. Yancey Ralston. Why we need to talk about health inequality, trauma and loss. Very good book. If you want to get that, I recommend you do. And chapter 6, the first part of chapter 6, which is written by Stuart Taylor in this book, begins with an insight into my parents' story, if you're interested. But anyway, yeah, Black Grief and Healing. A number of different authors in this book giving different perspectives about the Black experience of grief, bereavement, trauma and loss. And I was also gifted this book at the conference as well, which is called A Woman's Choice, Navigating Early Menopause. And that one is by Natalie Campbell. So I was gifted that at the conference as well. So yeah, I think I should mention those. What was not so good? What did I find was not so good about this conference? There were 3 things mainly that I felt weren't so good. Number 1 was that I felt like the unique experience of men when it comes to loss, grieving, trauma, bereavement was largely omitted from this conference, which was largely missing from this conference. Now, even though there were men in attendance and there were male panelists, there were men on the panels, none of them spoke from the perspective of the unique male experience or the specific male experience or their experience as men. They spoke as either the professionals in their field or they spoke from other perspectives, more generic, but it wasn't as men. So there are things that are, I guess, more particular to our experience as men that I feel need a particular level of or lane of attention if these conversations are going to be had. For example, I mentioned earlier on that people often talk about the fact that men need to speak more or men should speak up more. Well, for that to happen, you first need to get into and under or understand the reasons why men don't speak up or men don't speak up as much as a lot of people say that we should. And normally it's women saying that we don't speak up enough, men need to speak more. But the point is, you first have to have an under or understanding of the reasons why men don't speak up as much as they perhaps should do before we can get to the point of doing that, you know. And so looking at some of the reasons and getting to the root of what are some of the reasons why men don't speak is one of the things that was missing. Why perhaps men don't access support services enough was missing. Just the differences in the experiences of loss and bereavement. For example, I remember I was reminded at one point when I was at this conference of when my brother passed. I was 15 at the time. He was 27. And this was my first real experience of death and bereavement. My gran had passed some few years earlier, but I was really young, too young to really remember much about that experience. The main thing I remember is about her being brought into the house and her body being on display in the front room. I don't really remember much more about it than that because I was too young. But my brother's death, I was 15. I think in my last year at secondary school, and I remember that one vividly, very, very well. That was my first real experience of death and bereavement. And I remember the house being full, packed up with people for 2 weeks straight, every day for 2 weeks. The house was full with people coming to pay their respects to my parents or to my brother, if you like. And people really, I remember that people really rallied more around my mum than they did around my dad. And while I get that the experience of a mother losing their child is different from a father losing their child, because the woman has the experience of that child growing within inside her and giving birth to that child. The man doesn't have that. So I get that that's one area in which the experience is very different. However, my brother passing was not just my mum's loss, it was my dad's loss. It was also my loss and my brother's loss. But in terms of my parents, it wasn't just my mum that lost her son. It was my dad who also lost his son. But people didn't rally to him in the same way that they did to my mum. And that's one of those ways in which, you know, the experience is different for a man than for a woman. And so these kind of experiences, these kind of nuances, I felt was missing from this conference. And I could go on and give other examples, not just from my own experience, but also from being a facilitator, my experience of being a facilitator or a co-facilitator, I should say, in support spaces for men around grief and bereavement. There is a men's group that still runs, that meets I think it's fortnightly, they still meet. That is specifically for black men around grief and bereavement, and I used to be a co-facilitator in this space, as well as being a member of another group, which I'll probably speak on later, the Lost Cafe. So anyway, the point is those unique experiences of men I felt was missing, and there was no one that was really speaking. There was no one that was speaking specifically from the experience of men about grief and loss, trauma and bereavement, and the things that are specific to us and our experience as men. So that was a disappointment for me. That was a big disappointment for me. Another thing that I felt that was not good is that the very first session that I went into in the morning, I felt there was this, how should I put, I'm trying not to say anti-men, but I can't think of a better description. There was an atmosphere or a rhetoric that was very much against men. It was almost anti-men, and there was a lot of the women speaking was a lot of the women speaking spoke from a perspective of victimhood and of men being the enemy. And I give an example. Within, I don't know, within maybe about half an hour of me sitting down in the main room, one of the panelists was invited, I think, to introduce herself. And one of the first things, maybe even the first thing she said was, I don't know, she said, why do men hate women? I don't know why men hate women. I don't understand why men hate women. Now, instantly I'm like this. I'm looking around, I'm confused, and my back is kind of up a little bit here now because I wasn't aware that I hate women. I wasn't aware that the majority of the male species hate women. I wasn't aware that this was a thing. This is not a thing to my knowledge and experience of myself or the men that I've grown up with and the men that I associate with now. That is not my experience, that men hate women. All men, or generally most men, hate women. That's not my experience at all. So this got my back up a bit immediately, if I'm honest. And this person went on to then talk about how they work for a organization that provides support for women who are victims of violence by men, and went to talk about about men murdering women, and ended this talk by saying, and I'm quoting, women are the victims within the context of deaths and murders at the hands of men. Women are the victims, quote. So this was at the beginning of the day. This was the first thing I'm sitting down in the morning, and within half an hour of me sitting down, I'm hearing men hate women, don't know why men hate women, men murdering women, and women are the victims. So, as a man in this place that doesn't hate women, and I don't know any men that do hate women, my back is up now, and I'm really a bit offended by this. In fact, no, I'm more than a bit offended. I'm very offended by this, and I'm getting quite angry by this talk, to be honest. And when I heard this woman say that men are the victims, I thought, really? So I got my phone out and I went into my phone and I just did a little bit of quick research on the stats of the number of victims of murders at the hands of men broken down by gender. Because we can all do that now. We all have the whole internet and the whole world in our pockets. We can do that. So I literally sat there and did that, and the stats came up from a number of sources, and I've done it several times since. That clearly shows, and I'll quote one: the Office of National Statistics shows that the rates of homicide in the UK, when it comes to homicides in the UK, the numbers are significantly and consistently higher for men. Significantly and consistently higher in England and Wales. The most recent stats coming between 2022 to 2024. Those are the most recent available stats. The number of men, for all the deaths in the UK, men accounted for about 70% of those deaths. And so you can break them down more. I don't want to give a full breakdown of the stats, and I haven't got them all in front of me, but I've researched this about 3 times since I went to the conference, and each time it's the same thing. The number of deaths within the UK, especially violent deaths, the number of victims is overwhelmingly men. About 70% of them are men compared to about 30% of women. So the fact was, women are not the victims, as this woman was openly stating at this conference. And what started to annoy me even more is that other people in the room started to get on board with this false narrative. Even some men in the room were getting on board with this and even getting quite tearful, saying, yeah, we must support the women and stop the violence against women. I'm thinking, but hold on, it's not women that are the main victims, it's men, particularly young men, predominantly losing their lives at the hands of other men, not women. Anyway, so this kind of irked me, continued to irk me, I should say. And in addition to that, as I mentioned before, that Marcia Rigg was there speaking about the experience of fighting for justice for her brother, Sean. Someone was there who read a poem that was dedicated to Sean. Very deep and powerful poem. And within that poem, the poet read off, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he included a long list of names of people who had lost their lives in police custody. And of course, the majority of those names were men. Not all, but the majority of the names were men, because the majority of people who die also at the hands of the state, particularly violent deaths at the hands of the police, are also men. The majority of people who die within the armed forces, particularly violent deaths in the armed forces, are men. The majority of people who make up suicide stats are men. The majority of people who die from cancer are men. So this narrative that was being presented, that women are the victims when it comes to death, particularly violent deaths, was totally false. And I was itching to put my hand up and challenge this. But I didn't, because, as I said earlier on, my intention was not to go there and hold anybody accountable or anything like that. My intention was to go there to look, listen, and learn. So I sat on it. I held it down and I just parked those emotions and sat on them. But that was one of the things that I didn't like. And I felt that, or I felt / found that this rhetoric permeated throughout the rest of the day. So when I went into, after lunch, and I went into one of the breakout rooms, this same energy was also coming from the women in that space. Now, that room, let me see if I can just get I went into I don't need that. I went into a workshop room after lunch break that was about childlessness and losing your children. And I'll probably speak a bit more about why I went into that space a bit later on. But I went into that space, and like I said with my brother's passing, I understand that the experience of women is different from the experience of men. The experience of mothers is going to be different from the experience of fathers when it comes to childlessness or child loss. I get that. However, again, within this space, however, as I said before, for every child that has passed, there is not only a mother that's lost a child, it's the father. There's a father that's lost their son or daughter as well. And in that workshop, again, I didn't hear anything from the male perspective. Now, I should say here that there were two other guys in that space, and they could have spoke before I got in there. I got in there a little bit late because I found myself at the back. Well, all the workshops started late because the main session overran, and then I found myself at the end of the line of people to get food in the lunch break. So I got in there a little bit late. So they could have spoken before I got in there, but certainly while I was in there, I didn't hear either of those guys speak about their perspective or a perspective about childlessness from a man's perspective. The women predominantly spoke, and it was again from their perspective as women, which, like I said before, I get. But there was a lot of this victimhood talk as well. There was a lot of somebody saying that, how, yeah, why is it women, we're always the victims and we always the ones that suffer, and that kind of thing. There was a lot of victimhood by the women in that space. And again, I'm sitting there as a man in this space, and I'm hearing all of this victimhood that's being aimed at men. So again, it's getting my back up even more. And I felt like this has kind of run on from the scene that was set at the very first session in the morning, where one of the panelists, very first thing, why do men hate women and men are murdering women and women are the victims? And I feel like that kind of sentiment just ran on. The women carried that energy into the workshop in the afternoon as well. So I'm now sitting in this workshop and I'm just getting more and more vexed with this perspective. Now, why did I go into a workshop on childlessness? I went into that workshop not because any of my children have passed. The women who were speaking there were speaking predominantly from the perspective of having lost their child having died, or having had a miscarriage or stillbirth. Very painful and traumatic experience that I can't even begin to wrap my head around. But they were speaking from that perspective. I went into this space when I saw childlessness. That resonated with me because I'm also grieving. I'm also grieving the loss of a child who is still breathing. And what I mean by that is because I've been cut off from one of my children by his mother. And because of that, I feel like I'm grieving that relationship. In fact, I feel like I'm grieving the relationship with two of my children who have either been cut off from directly or been alienated from by their mothers. But I'm grieving those relationships. And that's what took me into that workshop. That's what appealed to me when I saw childlessness. Because particularly with my youngest child, I can't see him, I can't talk to him. I've been completely cut off from that child by his mother. And when I was listening to the women talk about their experiences of losing their child, a lot of what they were saying, I also felt. I heard them talking about the loss of the connection and us being able to see and touch the child, and wondering about what would have happened in the child's future, and all of this stuff. A lot of what they talked about, they felt. I was also feeling, even though my children are still breathing. But I didn't feel like I could really voice that in this space because it was so dominated by the women talking from their perspective, and this victimhood thing and this kind of anti-men sentiment that I got made me feel like this isn't the space for me to talk. And at one point I did put my hand up because I wanted to interject and put my perspective there and say, actually, listen, I'm here because of this perspective. I am also grieving the loss of a child who's still breathing, and this is what it is. But there was a woman who spoke before me and she broke down crying, and again I just thought, you know what, this isn't for me. This isn't for me. And I felt like I was a wolf talking to in a room of sheep, or a sheep in a room of wolves who were not going to be open or susceptible to anything that I had to say. So when the facilitator of the group came to me for me to speak, I just said, it's all right, don't worry. And just sat on it and kept it moving. But I didn't feel like I could really speak in that space. And I feel like that carried on from the narrative that was introduced in the morning. And I felt it was a gross misrepresentation of men. It was a misrepresentation of facts, and it was also, I felt like a character assassination of men, a gross misrepresentation of men and the facts with regards to statistics and who are the real victims when it comes to death, particularly violent death. So, yeah, there was this anti-men and kind of victimhood sentiment that seemed to run throughout the day. It began in the morning, and I think I felt it just ran throughout the rest of the afternoon as well. That wasn't good for me. Being there as a man, I really didn't enjoy that at all, at all, at all, at all, at all, at all. I really didn't. The other thing that I felt was not so good, and this isn't so much of a criticism of the event, I felt that there wasn't enough time to really delve into some of the topics. So this was a 1 day conference. And as I said, the main session in the morning overran because there was so much to talk about. And so we got into the afternoon session and after lunch late. When we finished the later session later on in the afternoon, we didn't really get to the end of what we wanted to talk about then either. So I felt like, although it was really good to have a whole day with this conference, I felt like it needed 2 days. So if they do this again, and I really hope that they do, I hope that it will run over 2 days instead of trying to cram all of this into one. So that was it. That's what I felt wasn't so good. So that's my take on this conference, the Equity in Grief Festival. It was called Equity in Grief Festival 2026. Overall, I give the festival / conference 8 out of 10. I generally thought it was good, and like I said before, it was great that it happened. It was great that a space had been created to have these conversations, not just with members of the community, but also with all of these scholars and historians and professionals and people who can give all these wonderful insights into this area. I thought it was really good that they did this. And I sincerely hope, like I said, I sincerely hope they do it again, and hopefully it will go over 2 days. But I hope if they do it again, or when they do it again, the experience of men will be much more considered. The unique experience of men will be much more considered, and there will be less of this anti-men victimhood rhetoric from the women, because women don't own grieving. Grieving and trauma and loss is not exclusive to women. We experience all of that too. We also experience grieving and loss and trauma from our own perspective. And those are conversations that also need to be had, as much as women having these conversations as well. So if it happens again, I hope they will do that differently, and that they will have men who can speak from the male perspective of grief, trauma, and loss. So that's my review. I'm going to wrap this up. I didn't even think I'd speak for this long, but let me just wrap this up by saying that although this is day 2 of this process, I'm already starting to learn some of the benefits of doing this. In yesterday's video, I talked about the things that Glow had said, who got me onto this, about some of the things that she'd learned from doing this, and how she found that the process of speaking about these things had given her more clarity on those topics just by the process of doing this. And I'm already starting to feel the same. I feel that the process of me thinking about what I was going to speak on today, and the process of even just doing this, has given me a greater clarity on my own perspective on that conference and that festival. So I'm already starting to see some of the benefits that Glow talked about in doing this daily video. I feel much clearer in my head about what this conference and festival was, why I went there, what I was looking to get from it, what was good, what was not so good, what I'm looking for in the future if they do it again, just by the process of thinking about what I want to speak about here today and talking openly about it. So I'm looking forward to going ahead with this and hopefully getting more clarity on all the different subjects that I'm going to be speaking about for the rest of this 30-day challenge. I'm going to leave it there for now, and yeah, I hope you've got something from this. Oh, one other thing that I want to share is the funeral director who spoke at the conference. I'm gonna try and find his name real quick. Oh, I don't have the guy's name. Anyway, there was a funeral director that spoke there, and one of the key things that he said, one of the key takeaways I took from this, which I'm gonna relay to you, I've kind of mentioned it a little bit already, is he talked about people having these conversations about funerals and what they want to happen for them, because this is going to obviously come to all of us. And he really urged people to have these conversations beforehand, because he said if you don't make the decisions about what you want when you pass, other people are going to make those decisions for you, and they may not be what you want. But if you don't tell people and make it clear what you want, then other people will make those decisions for you. And as I said before, this is one of the main areas where I see and hear that discord happens amongst families, is arguments or disagreements about what different people believe should and shouldn't happen in the midst of someone's passing, particularly when it comes to funeral arrangements. So I'm urging people to talk to people, talk to your loved ones or your nearest and dearest about what you would want for your funeral or for your final journey, and let it be known now. Otherwise, other people, as I said, will make those decisions for you. They may or may not be what you want, and it may just add to the discourse and the pain and the trauma that people are already in because of your passing. It just amplifies the pain and suffering by having those arguments as well. I'm really grateful that I started to have these conversations with my dad before he passed. I asked him what he would like. I asked him if he would want a burial or a cremation, whether he'd want to be here or be to fly him home to Jamaica. I asked him, we had this conversation. So when he passed in 2020, I already had a good idea of what he wanted. And so it was easier for me to just do that for him, because he'd already made that clear. We'd already had that conversation. And I've also begun having these conversations with my eldest son. He started talking to me about what I would like if I became really ill, lost capacity, or if, when that time comes when I pass. He started asking me, Dad, what would you want? And so he's already becoming clear as well about what I want. Should I become ill, lose capacity, or pass as well? So just passing that on, it was a very powerful statement that funeral director, a very powerful message that funeral director shared with us, and it really resonated with me. So I share it with all of you and urge you all to have a conversation with your loved ones, and do it now, because tomorrow is promised to none of us. And as someone who has gone through lots of bereavement and who also works within the funeral industry, I am constantly reminded about the unpredictability and fragility of life. Tomorrow really is not promised to any of us. So have the conversation with someone now. Do it today if you can. Just get your wishes out there and let them be known to someone, one of your nearest and dearest. That is it. I will be back tomorrow with another video. I hope you've taken something away from this one, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 3. Peace.